The Dobbs decision may have overruled Roe versus Wade, but it certainly didn't make abortion illegal throughout America, and it has far from finished the abortion conversation throughout the states. Today, I'm joined by Trevor Pollo of Protect Life Michigan as we discuss what a potential constitutional amendment might do to send Michigan to the very top of abortion havens in America. Tune in now. Hi, folks. My name is Cam. I'm the host of the Pro-Life Guys podcast, and welcome to the show. This is a show dedicated to equipping you with the tools and information that you need to change minds, save lives, and transform culture. Often that pivots around apologetics and conversation skills, how to have meaningful conversations with friends, coworkers, colleagues, family members, whomever they may be. And sometimes we have to talk about politics and what is happening in Canada, in America, around the world, because this is often our starting point for conversation. Often how we get that entry point into having a meaningful conversation about whether or not abortion is an appropriate solution to challenging pregnancies that mothers and fathers are faced with. Oftentimes those conversations come about because our friends, our coworkers, our colleagues, whomever they may be, bring up things like the proposed constitutional amendment in Michigan. Michigan, for a long time, has been a very, very interesting state in that they have some very effective pro-life legislation already in effect, even before the fall of Roe versus Wade, as we'll talk about through the episode. I've got a 24-hour waiting period for somebody who seeks an abortion. There has to be a minimum 24 hours between booking the appointment and having the procedure done on their child. There has to be parental consent for anybody younger under the age of 18, I believe. And there's lots of support for mothers and families, and the pastoral arm of the pro-life movement is very strong in Michigan as well. I'm sure that I'm missing stuff that is active in Michigan too. Late-term abortions are banned after the stage of viability, 21, 22 weeks kind of thing. No abortions can be performed. And the trigger law that went into effect at the overturning of Roe versus Wade was actually a reversion back to a provision that was put in, I believe, in 1931, which ultimately banned a ton of abortions. As we're going to get into, Trevor's going to bring us up to speed on that. And that's what this episode is all about, understanding what is going on in Michigan, in case it comes up in conversation, so that you're knowledgeable about what is happening. And if you, as we'll get into at the end of the episode, if you have any opportunity to help out, to support the cause going in Michigan, this is going to be the first of many dominoes, and the direction that it falls will very likely impact the rest of the states throughout America as well. So without further ado, let's dive into my conversation with Trevor Pollo from Protect Life Michigan. All right, folks. Trevor, thanks a ton for joining the program. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
It is my pleasure. This is really cool. I've been more familiar with Protect Life Michigan and everything that's happening in Michigan, largely because one of my intern alumni, Rebecca Punches, is on staff with Protect Life Michigan. And so I've had the opportunity to stay in the loop with what she's up to. And there's a ton going on in Michigan. We're going to dive very deep into that as this conversation unfolds. But I wonder, for the sake of our audience, we have audience members, I guess, audience people, whatever, tuning in from across Canada, across the states, around the world. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how you find yourself in the middle of this Proposal 3 back and forth happening in Michigan since the fall of Roe versus Wade with the Dobbs decision in June. I'm sure it's been a wild ride. Where do you fit into this entire abortion conversation happening in Michigan right now?
Yeah, thanks so much. So basically, I'm with Protect Life Michigan, and we are an activism-focused group focusing on working with high school, college, and young professionals across the state of Michigan. So we've got about 23, I think, or so chapters on college campuses, all the major universities. And then we work with about 40 high schools as well. And we work with these young people to train them to be pro-life apologists and pro-life activists, to change the culture in the state of Michigan, to recognize the violent nature of abortion on the most innocent victims in our state. Historically, what that's looked like is our group has been out there doing very similar work to CCBR, where we're doing outreach on the streets, on college campuses, in community centers, on social media, trying to start a constructive dialogue on abortion and have that dialogue with pro-choice people, build effective arguments, and ultimately change hearts and change minds on this issue, with the goal of saving as many lives as possible. Um, and that's been really exciting to be able to partner with groups like CCBR and have you guys come in and train us and create equal in the states as well, working closely with them. And it's been, I think, preparing us for what's happening this year right now in Michigan, because we developed this army of activists that some of them now are in their 30s or 40s and have been working with us for 10, 15 plus years, and we've learned how to talk about this issue in a persuasive way. So when we heard about Proposal 3, or this ballot initiative that's going to be coming up in Michigan, our immediate thought was we can go and we can battle this against this proposal in a winsome, persuasive way, targeted at the middle moderate voter who is not a fan of abortion, might still want to see it legalized, in some cases at least, but definitely will recognize the radical nature of Proposal 3 and will be an easy flip to defeat this.
Gotcha. Love it. I guess I'm kind of piecing things together in my mind.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit more about how these conversations are unfolding. But since you
Yep.
brought it up, tell me a little bit about what Proposal 3 on this ballot that'll be voted on November 8th entails. This, obviously, for anyone who is familiar with it, is a pretty big deal. Bring the listeners who might not be super familiar with Proposal 3 up to speed on what it actually entails.
So, Proposal 3 is going to be voted on by Michigan voters this fall, November 8th. And if it passes, it will amend the state constitution with the most radical pro abortion law, essentially, of any of the 50 states, including states like California, New York, things like that. And that's really concerning because obviously, being a part of our Constitution, that supersedes some of the laws that we have in place. A lot of the laws that are very common sense laws that are there to protect women and protect children. So some of the things that are in Proposal 3, it doesn't contain any restrictions on abortion through all 9 months. It doesn't allow discrimination of protection of abortion rights based on age. So our law on parental consent, for example, making sure that if a child is seeking a surgical abortion, that their parents have to be notified, would be repealed. It protects anyone that is involved with the abortion procedure, even if they're non-doctors performing abortions. So all this concern about dangerous back alley abortions, they would be legally protected by this constitutional amendment forever in the state of Michigan. And what's really concerning is that, obviously these things are, whether you're pro-life or you're pro-choice, these are radical and extreme things that are being put forward, but it's being put forward under the disguise of restore Roe, restore what was normal for 50 years. And given what's going on this year, that is something that is can be an easy sell for some voters. They see the headlines, they see the reaction of the Dobbs decision, and they're like, "Oh, that's so moderate, that's normal. Restore Roe, I can get behind that." But in the language itself, it goes way beyond what Roe allowed.
Gotcha. Thank you for bringing this up to speed. I know that many of the provinces in Canada here have often looked towards Michigan with some of the entry level. What kind of legislation could we pass on a provincial level, and looking at something, like a 24-hour waiting period
Mhm.
of you need to have that space to actually process what is happening in your life, because as you and I would both know, and anyone who's actively involved in talking to people about abortion, for many people who experience challenging or unplanned pregnancies, it's a matter of devastating news. And how do I put the genie back in the bottle? How do I close Pandora's box? How do I cope with all of this? And that 24-hour waiting period for many people allows them that space to actually talk with their spouse, with their family, with their whomever they might need to, their church family, whatever it may be, and figure out that maybe this is doable, maybe this is manageable. Things like the parental consent that you mentioned, as again, something we've talked about here in Alberta, Canada, over and over and over again, about how regardless of whether somebody wants access to abortion, those who don't want access to abortion shouldn't be paying for it, or that minors shouldn't be accessing it when minors can't receive a Tylenol or an Advil from a school nurse, but can be sent down to the abortion clinic. And so I'm curious, based on all of the, obviously Michigan hasn't been exactly where you wanted. I mean, we'd love for Michigan to be entirely abortion free, but bearing in mind the very, like you mentioned, common sense legislation that is present, what if the conversation's been like? You guys have been out doing door knocking, you've been out on campuses, you've been talking to people with all of this in the mix, with all of the hysteria going on. How have you found the conversations? Do you find that people are becoming tethered and kind of you're able to talk them down off the ledge? Do you find that people are stuck in their ways and they just got the blinders on? What have the conversations been like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's been the really encouraging thing is that this year has been a whirlwind from the high in June when Roe was overturned and we're popping champagne in the backyard, like it was awesome. And then a few weeks later, they turned in these signatures to get this on the ballot, and it immediately was back to the grind and trying to make sure this doesn't pass. So it's been a lot. What's been really encouraging has been the conversations themselves, because when we're specifically, our group in particular is targeting pro-choice voters. We're going after the moderate pro-choice person who says, if we ask them what their thoughts on abortion, they're going to say something to the effect of, I don't like abortion. I think it needs to be available for a few reasons, the extreme circumstances that women might find themselves in, or the health of the woman or life of the woman, obviously. But I don't want to see abortion used as birth control. I don't want to see late term abortion. And I don't want to see women in danger when they seek abortion. So when we go to these doors, that's the meat of who we're talking to. That's the bulk of the voter that we're interacting with. And what's really important for them when in those conversations to understand is that this is an extreme form of abortion. And just like they don't want to see an extreme ban on abortion necessarily, as a pro-choice person, they aren't comfortable with an extreme permission on abortion either. So when we're talking with people and we're talking about our coalition of groups, some of our people that we're going out door to door with are pro-choice. They do want to see abortion legal, but they recognize the danger that this amendment is, and we're able to talk about. It's wrong to treat abortion in this extreme way. Even if you're pro-choice, this goes way too far. And we're seeing, when we're actually able to talk to someone about what's in this amendment and what it does, the vast majority of voters will commit to voting no on the spot on their doorstep. And it's turned this really into a numbers game. Who can talk to the most voters about what's in this amendment? Because whoever does can win this thing. And I think the other side knows that, which is why they've been really hesitant to share the text of the amendment, for example. Until a few weeks ago, it wasn't on their website at all since February. There's a loud enough cry for them to get it out there, so they did put it on, but it's hidden away in the FAQ on a page, not easy to find. So we're taking the opposite track, and we put it on our front page of our website, on our landing page. We reference it in all of our literature. We highlight where our claims are coming from, because the text itself speaks to the radical nature of this amendment.
Gotcha. That's so useful for everyone to know that this isn't a matter of the pro-lifers trying to parade on
Mm-hmm.
from the Dobbs decision, but rather and I'm really fascinated about the coalition that you guys have been building. Obviously, I know that you guys are probably collaborating with traditional pro-life groups like the Knights of Columbus, like Michigan
Mm-hmm.
Pro-Life and whatever else. But I'm fascinated, and maybe there's a rabbit trail that I shouldn't be pursuing, but you know what? It's my podcast, so I get to pursue it as I will. Tell me a little bit more about the coalition and the people that you are getting to work with. That
Yeah.
is it people that have been politically active in other realms that you didn't necessarily see yourself shoulder to shoulder with? Is it people coming out of the woodwork that have never been politically active before? Who's part of these teams of door knockers going out?
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting. So like, yeah, you have the stalwarts there. You have Right to Life. You have Knights of Columbus. You have the Catholic Conference. You have all these groups that you'd expect to be a part of this. Obviously, most of our coalition is fairly apolitical, though. We go out knocking doors with people who describe themselves as progressive pro-lifers, people who are on the far left of the political spectrum that usually feel pretty isolated where they're at, but they're out knocking doors against this. There are people that are out knocking doors that have exceptions for abortion and things like that, and are part of this coalition. And they're able to communicate just clearly why we should vote against this amendment as any one of us. The Democrats for Life are part of our coalition, so they're reaching out to left leaning individuals in a targeted way to talk about how no industry should define its own regulation. The oil and gas industry should not define its own regulation. The gun industry should not define its own regulation. But this amendment would allow the abortion industry to define its own health and safety standards and how they should be treating women, which no other industry or healthcare professional should be allowed to do. And those messages are really resonating for people because it can't just be pro-lifers talking about to other pro-lifers about how bad this amendment is. We need to be able to communicate to people who have different views on a broad range of issues, who would normally vote for a progressive or pro-choice candidate, but can recognize the radical nature and be able to split their ticket essentially and say, I'm voting Democrat or I'm voting Green Party or whatever it is, but this amendment is too extreme.
That's so cool, and that's one of the coolest parts of the pro-life movement. I mean, I mean, we're not even close to that degree of collaboration here in Canada because we haven't had the political press necessarily that has come up. But yeah, I mean, I think my colleague Alex Van Brunhorst, one of my best friends, a Netherlands Reformed congregation Calvinist Protestant, and myself a Catholic, and we probably never would have crossed paths until getting unified under the pro-life cause. And I'm sure that it makes for very spicy conversations on your way to activism and after activism and all that
Yep.
kind of thing. And when you're sitting in the, I don't know whether you guys are Burger King people or wherever you would be after you're done a shift, but like, I can only imagine the conversations that ensue afterwards as you're talking about whether or not being a Democrat for life is a contradiction in terms or
Yep.
whether that's the best middle path or whatever it may be. But that's
Yep.
so cool that you guys are able to
Yep.
come together on something so important here. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and so based on that, I guess we're going to start moving towards, I mean, the meat and potatoes of this, of how people can get involved to help make sure
Yeah.
that Proposal 3 doesn't get passed on the ballot. But maybe bring our audience up to speed a little bit about Michigan itself and kind of the culture of Michigan, because I find it interesting having people understand. I mean, especially as a Canadian, I look at the states, I'm like, okay, well, we're looking at pro-life states like Ohio and Oklahoma. We're looking at pro-abortion states like California and New York.
Mhm.
For a guy like me, I don't have a very clear understanding about the culture of Michigan. And I know that it can always be tainted. I don't know if you're a Michigan man born and raised, if you're an
Yep.
import or whatnot. I chuckle so I'm from Victoria, British Columbia growing up, which is kind of like it's not even the liberal hub of Canada. It's kind of like the NDP or Green Party hub of Canada. It's about as left wing as you can possibly get. So I come here to Alberta, and it's like a conservative, not quite a utopia, but much closer to that than Victoria. And everyone's like, oh, Alberta's the most liberal province in Canada somehow, or Lethbridge is the most liberal city in all of Canada. Give me some kind of perspective on, generally speaking, has Michigan kind of just been a swing state? Is it something
Mhm.
that you would anticipate that if no pro-choice advocates and no pro-life advocates went out there and there's no campaigning whatsoever, would this be a dead draw? Is it already leaning
Mhm.
towards abortion advocates? Is it already leaning towards pro-lifers? And you're just trying to keep them there. I think, I mean, the one that comes to my mind is the referendum in Ireland a couple of years ago,
Mhm.
and how that was a largely pro-life community that had been slipping away for a long time towards the pro-abortion worldview. Where is Michigan at when it comes to their culture and what the everyday person, I know that you've touched on already, is at on the abortion issue?
Yeah. Yeah, Michigan's kind of a really interesting state politically. Historically, it was really developed. The politics in Michigan were really driven by unions, kind of blue collar Democrats out of the auto industry and things like that. So the UAW still has a really strong foothold. Unions are really strong. Similar to a lot of other Midwestern states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, things like that. What's interesting is that though Michigan and a lot of those states historically have had a really strong left-leaning preference on national elections, voting for generally we are going to vote for the Democratic candidate. For example, it did go to Trump in 2016, which was very unexpected. Previous to that, it had been since I think the 90s the last time we voted for a Republican president. So the landscape here is Democratic, but it is not the same type of left-leaning progressive vote that is going to be represented on the coasts of America, like New York and California and things like that. The Democrat in Michigan is very much like a blue-collar Democrat, someone who is Catholic, goes to church, it has a strong union vote necessarily, but does not generally go all the way towards that progressive end of the spectrum necessarily. Which means that it puts the pro-life movement or the abortion issue, I guess, in a really tight battle because you have a lot of people that vote Democratic reliably and put Democrats in power that can drive, policy and decision making and things like that, especially at the national level, when the voters themselves do not share that same ideology necessarily with the people that they elect. Because we have the two-party system and you have to choose Democrat or Republican, a lot of times that happens where we elect people that don't represent necessarily the votes of the voters or the ideology of the voters they elect them. So it puts this abortion issue as one of those key battles that we're waging. So as far as the pro-life movement in Michigan, it's very, very strong. We have a lot of really strong pro-life laws that we're able to pass under the Roe framework, basically. We even had a ban on abortion that was triggered by the Dobbs decision that was the strongest ban on abortion in the United States because it was put into place in 1931, and it was actually reaffirmed after the Roe decision by the Michigan Supreme Court as being a valid Michigan law, obviously superseded by the Roe decision, but it was the only ban on abortion after Roe fell to be upheld by a state Supreme Court. So when Roe fell, that law was poised to become the strongest and most defendable, basically, law in the country. Which made Michigan the target, I think, leading up to the Dobbs decision for this referendum, for example, which is why national money is being poured in by the ACLU and Planned Parenthood in Michigan, because they're bringing this idea. They're saying, all right, it's back to the states, which means we need to get abortion rights into the Constitution of all 50 states to preserve that right for women. And Michigan has the strongest battle to fight, is also a swing state, does have, it is going to be a pro-choice state. If you poll people in Michigan, they're going to lean more pro-choice than Kansas or Texas or anything like that. But if they can win in Michigan, they're going to skip right over into Ohio, and they're going to skip right over into Indiana, who have aggressive abortion policies that have been put in place. They're going to go from state to state, kind of like island hopping in World War II. They're going to state hop across the United States until they get this really firm constitutional defense of abortion rights, basically, in place.
Gotcha. I know that you've talked about how vibrant the pro-life movement is in Michigan. And I know that you also mentioned that your focus obviously is the door-to-door, the everyday person living in Detroit, or Detroit's the only city that I know in Michigan. Lansing, I think. Detroit,
Yeah,
Lansing,
there you
I
go.
know those two. I was a big Red Wings fan growing up, and so I know a little bit about that. And I know that we're not out here to do name calling. I'm just curious, the pro-lifers that you're talking to at the doorstep, are they taking this seriously? Or do you find that this is like you're trying to help them understand that this is big? This is going to be something that is going to, like you mentioned, set the tone for America. It's going to be really difficult to overhaul this. Do you find that there's pro-lifers that are responding with a, this is fear mongering, it's not going to be that bad kind of thing? Or do you find that most pro-lifers that you end up talking to at a doorstep are already aware of just how monumental this election is going to be?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a mix. It's getting a lot
Yeah.
better now because there were a lot of people when Roe fell that were able to take that big sigh and just like
Mm,
we accomplished, and we should have, like, we accomplished something really, really great. It was the work of people for literally decades that set up
yeah.
that prepared this this year for what happened. So a lot of people were feeling very very good at that point. And some people even thought, like, oh, we've got our trigger law in place. Abortion now is banned in Michigan. We're a pro-life state finally after 5 decades of being an abortion haven. And to shake people out of that, might have taken a little while. There was a lot of hope that they wouldn't be able to get their signature. There was a lot of hope that the signatures would be invalidated in the review process and things like that. There, so there was always just a little bit of hope, but everyone I think is really united right now on this point that this is really dangerous. And when we talk to those people on their doorsteps and they're pro-life, they understand the implications of this, the supremacy of the Constitution, of something like this being added to the Constitution is very concerning because people have nuanced opinions sometimes about the issue of abortion, and people recognize that. And if this becomes part of our Constitution, your nuance on this issue doesn't matter anymore. It's out of your hands forever. It doesn't matter who you elect, who you donate to, who you advocate for and campaign for. We're stuck with the most radical abortion policy in the country, potentially for decades to come.
Yeah, because I'm sure I don't know the particulars. I don't know even if you know the particulars of overturning a constitutional amendment at the state level. You got to be looking at some kind of a supermajority or something. I mean, it's not like this is going to get decided at the next general election kind of thing. This, like you said, is going to be decades in the unmaking. That's fair to say, right?
Yeah, I mean, the ACLU and Planned Parenthood paid almost $10 million just to get their signatures for
Mm,
this amendment, let alone the actual campaign effort they have to do now from July through the election. There are legislative ways around it, which require either 2/3 or 3/4 majority, supermajority, which is practically speaking impossible for us to get, along with the governorship and everything, obviously. So then the only other recourse would be some sort of federal action, which also at this point, practically speaking, is beyond possibility. So it is like a burn the ships moment right now in the pro-life movement in Michigan. Absolutely.
gotcha. So let's dive into it. What do we do? What
Yeah.
happens between now and November 8th? And I'm sure that we can talk. We'll do another episode after November 8th, depending on whatever the outcome. But like, I'm sure three different categories of people come to my mind: people who are already in Michigan and can have boots on the ground, people outside of Michigan who can come and put boots on the ground for a limited amount of time, and
Yep.
people either inside of Michigan or outside of Michigan who might not be able to put boots on the ground and door knock per se, but might be able to help out in other ways. Talk me through
Yep.
how each of those three categories of people can help.
Yeah. So the way that this amendment is set up is if you poll the average person in Michigan, you say, "Hey, do you want abortion to be legal in the state?" About 6 out of 10 people are going to say yes. But as soon as you start saying, "Do you want late term abortion, repealed parental consent, and non-doctors being able to aid or perform abortion?" that support drops immediately because while we're a pro-choice state, we are not a radically pro-choice state. So what needs to happen is our messaging needs to get in front of every single voter many times to make sure that the radical nature of this proposal is clear to them, so they know to reject it. Even if they're pro-choice, they know to reject this amendment. So the way people can do that, if they're in the state of Michigan, obviously, they're able to join us as we go and canvass. We're targeting persuadable voters. We're not targeting radically pro-choice or radically pro-life voters. We're going to the doorsteps of the people that are in that kind of mushy middle that we talk about, where they're very movable on radical abortion, even if they want to preserve some abortion access. Those are the people we're talking to. And when we talk to them over and over again, we're able to confirm their no vote. So, absolutely want you all to join in on our effort to reach hundreds of thousands of those voters over the next 4 to 6 weeks, really. Um, Absentee voting starts next week. So, it is really, really important, since about 50% of our ballots are going to be early voting, that we get out there as quickly as possible at this point. If you're in the state, that absolutely do that. We do have some groups that are coming and aiding us from like Ohio and Indiana and things like that. So if you're able to get here and join us, we will plug you in immediately. We definitely need as much support as we can possibly get to reach as many people as possible. We will never reach enough voters. There will always be someone else that we need to talk to or follow up with. So we're working with a couple of groups that are coming in to help us over the next few weeks. So if you're able to, reach out to us. I'll give you our information, but reach out to us and we'll be happy to coordinate with you. If you're not able to come canvas with us, or you're in a state and can't get here or whatever, there's a couple things you can do. One, we need people that are able to help fund some of the messaging that we're doing. So the lit needs to be bought, the ads need to be aired, the digital ads need to be placed. All of that takes, a lot, obviously a lot of money, to be able to compete with Planned Parenthood. Right now, our governor is running for re-election on the abortion platform, and just herself has amassed about $45 million for her re-election campaign. And a lot of that is going to be a pro-abortion messaging, tying her campaign and Proposal 3 together. The ACLU and Planned Parenthood is reportedly pledging another $10 to $20 million that they're going to advertise with. So we need to raise money to make a competitive ad buy, basically, across the state. So money, boots on the ground. If you're unable to walk from door to door with us all the time, there are phone calls and text messages and emails and social media posts and yard signs, anything that will help make sure that people know that this amendment is radical and extreme. The biggest thing I want to make sure everyone knows is we have a message that works, and the message is this is too extreme for Michigan. This allows abortion through all 9 months. It repeals parental consent, and it repeals health and safety standards for women. If we can get that message out to every voter in the state of Michigan through these efforts, then we can absolutely defeat this proposal on November 8th. So if you can help with any of that, I'll just plug the website. You can go to stopabortionextremism.com. And you can read the text amendment yourself and see the backup for the claims they're making, the sources and everything. And you can sign up at the bottom, and we'll reach out to you and get you connected with the appropriate person to get you involved.
Love it. I'll drop that in the description below. You touched on it already. For somebody who says, you know what, I would love to get involved, but I feel completely unprepared. I have no idea what I would say at a doorstep. I have no idea what I'm going to say on the phone with one of these people. What if the person who picks up is my coworker? What if the person who picks up is my aunt? Whatever. Give me a nutshell. What do you guys offer for training, support, talking points,
Yeah.
whatever? This is something that anybody can do, right? You don't need to be an expert apologist. You don't need to be a seasoned veteran in the pro-life movement. This is something that whether you're a 95-year-old person in a home
Yep.
care home that has access to your personal phone right beside you, you can just crush phone calls all day. This is a 14-year-old in high school who wants to make a difference, and anybody in between. Yeah. What kind of support, what kind of training can you guys offer?
Yeah, so we've done that. We've done everything. We've created the process to onboard you as quickly as possible. Now, I do want to say you're your own worst enemy when you think about door knocking, because in your mind, you think it is going to be the worst thing that you can possibly imagine. And I understand it, because it is an awkward thing. Like, I don't want to be a door to door salesman. Like, that's not my career. And part of that is because I don't like talking to strangers. Like, that's just something that like a lot of people don't feel comfortable with. And the best thing I can say is that we have hundreds and hundreds of people that have gone out and they've come back again. It's not as bad as we seem to think it's going to be. People ultimately, when you're on the door, they want to listen to you. They don't want you to stick around. They don't want to, get into a 15, 20-minute conversation with you. They want you to get off their porch at some point. So those conversations are really easy. They're really quick, and our messaging works. So as far as training, if you sign up with us, we'll send you recorded training, or you can join and do like a small group training if you have some people that you want to train together, for example, in person. The training takes literally like 20 minutes. It's super easy. We have an app that tells you what houses to go to. These houses have already screened out people that are extremely pro-choice. And then when we go up and knock on a door, the best thing is that we use pre-screening questions when we're starting our script. And if we start figuring out that this person is a absolute yes vote anyway, it's super easy to be like, well, thank you so much for your time. Have a great rest of your day. And we walk away and move on to the next house that's a persuadable voter. So we're not sticking around talking with anyone that's angry or mad or anything like that. And when you show up for your first shift, you're going to shadow one of us. You're going to shadow us for a few houses. We're going to shadow you for a few houses. You're going to be comfortable after typically 3 to 7 houses. You're going to be 100% ready to go. You'll be out with a buddy walking on each side of the street going forward. We have all the support you possibly need. I realized I'm definitely asking everyone to do something that is uncomfortable. I think in a lot of ways, that's what we're called exactly to do throughout most of our life, is to be uncomfortable for justice. And I just know that, November 9th, I'm going to wake up whether we win or lose, obviously. And I know that like my voice is going to be tired, my feet are going to be sore, but I don't want to have any regrets about the part I played in this fight. That's the worst thing that I can imagine, is waking up wishing I wish I did a little bit more to prevent this from happening, to save these tens of thousands, these hundreds of thousands of lives that are on the line right now. And I don't want anyone out there to have that regret on November 9th.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to frame it, right? That this is our opportunity to make a massive difference. And I can't reiterate enough what you mentioned about door knocking, right? We do a ton of different projects. You guys do a ton of different projects, and each of them are valuable. I don't want to talk people out of doing campus activism. Absolutely. We need people doing campus activism for sure. But I would say that door knocking is a much lower starting point when it comes to who you're talking to. Because when you're out on the street corner or on a campus holding a sign, the people who are engaging with you are often self-selecting. They are the people who have a more vibrant
Mm-hmm.
voice on abortion, whether they're pro-life, whether they're supporting abortion. These are people who are looking at abortion and saying, hey, I have something I want to say about that. Whereas when you're going door to door, you're talking to the everyday person. They're not self-selecting. You're not just getting the people who have the time and energy and interest in debating a pro-lifer on a campus. You're talking to somebody who's just like you, just a
Yep.
regular Joe or a regular Jill who, you know what, might not be motivated to vote in this. Maybe they say, well, I'm vaguely pro-life, but I don't care enough to really dig into this. Maybe there's somebody who's vaguely pro-choice and can be easily won over to, like you said, rejecting this extremism. I think that's fantastic. I think that's a
Yep.
great way to frame the entire thing. Am I missing anything? Is there anything else that we
No,
should be thinking about going into this?
yeah, I think you're exactly right, and I think that like you think when you're going out and doing door knocking that the number one thing you're going to hear is something angry or someone
Yeah.
mad or saying something mean or something like that. That's what happens on the street when you're doing street outreach.
Yeah.
Maybe that has something you hear pretty often. The number one thing that we are hearing from people on the doorstep is thank you. Literally, people like we're having these conversations. We're talking about what Proposal 3 is, and as we're walking away, they're thanking us for doing what we're doing. They're thanking us for talking about this because abortion is a lot of people's number one issue going into the ballot box this year because of everything that's happened so far this year. And they want to be informed. They feel like there's a lot of deception and lies and things like that being put out about what's happening, and they want to know what is going on. And when you have someone who's a reasonable person at your door
Hmm.
saying, "Hey, pro-life, pro-choice, look at how radical or extreme this is. I'm urging you to vote no," and you're able to point them to the resources, to the text, to the sources that are backing up your claims, the trust is there so easy, and people appreciate that. They thank you for that, and you're able to be so much more effective than posting on just social media or whatever. Like those things play a part, obviously, but the number one thing you can do is have a face to face conversation with a likely voter about this proposal this fall.
All right, folks, you heard him. Now's the time, eh? I'll roll out that classic. It's often given to Edmund Burke. I have no idea who actually said it. I know that Edmund Burke never said it, but if not now, then when? If not you, then who? Trevor, you're the man. Thank you for all the work that you're doing for Protect Life Michigan. Thank you for all the work that you're doing for preborn children in the state of Michigan and across America and around the world, because, like you said, November 8th, November 9th, this is going to have ripple effects everywhere else. If the pro-life movement can shut down the millions of dollars flown in from Planned Parenthood and reject abortion, that's going to have shockwaves, and that's going to embolden the pro-life movement across America and around the world. If Planned Parenthood trumps through and rocks it and gets what they want, then, like you said, it's just going to be the next island step over. So thanks a ton for everything you're doing. Thank you for the time spent with me on this program, and I wish you all the best and look forward, hopefully, to a bunch of Canadian support coming down to Michigan one way or another.
Love it. Thank you so much.
All right, folks, that was my conversation. Trevor Pollo from Respect Life Michigan, Protect Life Michigan. Sorry, not Respect Life Michigan. Protect Life Michigan. We're all in this for the same thing. Whatever the the titles are, I can certainly say that the name of CCBR has been butchered by countless people. So I apologize, Trevor, and all those involved with Protect Life Michigan. But I commend all of the incredible efforts that are happening down in this incredible state. I know very little about the state, as you heard through the conversation, apart from the fact that my childhood beloved Detroit Red Wings were there. It's hard not to be a Red Wings fan when you're born in the 90s because the Steve Yzerman, Brendan Shanahan dynasties, Chris Osgood in net. It was a dynasty. There's no way around it. And it was very difficult to be a hockey fan and not appreciate the Detroit Red Wings. I digress. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed the show. Check out the show notes for some of the info that we talked about through the episode. And I hope that you will check out more info, either prolifeguys.com, find us on YouTube, on all of your favorite podcatchers, whatever it may be, to get equipped so that together we can change minds, save lives, and transform culture. God bless y'all wherever you're at and however many hours in the day there are left wherever you are. Thanks much, and God bless.